You're listening to the Sunny Days Podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, a professional psychic, healer, and coach specializing in subconscious reprogramming, inner child work, and intuition development to help you create your happiest, most fulfilling life. Thank you for tuning in on this sunny day. Hello, welcome to the Sunny Days Podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, and today I have a special guest, Ryanna Hammond. So me and Ryanna actually met years ago online on Instagram back when I was a poet. So if you have been around with me for a very long time, my spiritual and coaching account that I have now is actually a poetry account. I even have a poetry book, which may be very surprising. I don't talk about that as much. Now I'm a spiritual coach, a psychic healer, and speaker. But yeah, we met on Instagram and totally clicked. Ryanna is a poet as well. And we realized that we were local to each other and we met up, and now we're great friends and hang out all the time in person. So with that, I will let Ryanna introduce herself and what she does.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Ryanna Hammond, and I am a business owner. My business is All With Heart, and everything really revolves around writing and spirituality. And so I do different writing workshops to lead people on different subjects like becoming your own best friend or tapping into your higher self. And then along with my writing workshops, I also have my own writing projects. So I have 5 poetry collections, and then my novel just came out. And then I have more ideas in the works always going on in my brain. I have a couple weeks left working in the actual work field, 9 to 5 type vibe. And then I'm off on my own free bird, taking a chance on myself. So
Yes.
a really exciting transition point in my life.
Yes, I love it. It's so cool to see how much we've both evolved, like personally and professionally. Like how I said, I kind of went off on this tangent. I don't write anymore. And
Right.
you ended up coming out with 5 poetry books, just released your novel, and you went back to school for writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I know, right? Because I'm like, when was it? 2020
Mhm.
when we met.
Yeah.
Just starting online poetry, posting the little square images, and then watching like where those paths took us. And in a lot of ways, there's still similarities. Like I know you went super spiritual vibe, and then I was like not as much on that or into that. And then now my life is like just reaching that point where it's like, oh, I'm gonna like follow the universe's plan for my life. And I'm like, oh, it's crazy how the paths work out, you know?
Yeah, it's so cool because like I always saw that in you, like that intuition and everything was so there. And it was just a matter of like going on your own journey and really finding that in yourself. And I know a lot of what you tap into, you receive from your solo trips. Yeah. Do you want to talk about those? I feel like she is my hero for doing this. Such admiration. Yeah.
So I started going on solo trips in 2020 was the first one I went on. A lot of inspiration in my life actually comes from heartbreak, which is really funny. But it is totally a catalyst for like creating new versions of yourself. So I was with a boyfriend who didn't want to go camping with me. And I was like, oh, I can't go camping. And then it suddenly clicked for me, like, no, you can go by yourself. I went on this trip. I never thought I would go on one again. I was like, that was terrifying. I stayed for one night. I was like, nope, like that was it. And then another heartbreak happens like 4 months later. And I'm like, I'm going into the wilderness. And that time I really enjoyed it. And I was like, wait a minute, like I'm meeting a whole new version of myself. I'm completely in tune with God's source, energy, highest self, whatever, all the different aspects of the one thing. It's, and so then I'm like, okay, there's like a reason and a purpose for this. So then I just start meeting random people along these journeys. Like I meet this woman, she's like, oh, they have like a national park book where you can like put a stamp every time you go to a new park. And then suddenly it like the idea flourishes into something new, like, oh, I want to go to all the national parks by myself. I want to go on all these solo trips. And I'm like, okay, now I have like a plan. And then like each time I've gone, it's just like further developed into something new, or I've like met a new version of myself. And on the very last trip I went on a solo trip to Utah, and I went to all 5 of the national parks there.
Oh, wow.
And when I'm coming back, that was after another heartbreak.
Yeah.
In May, I quit one job and took a whole month off just to go do that so that I could go have that time, but still have that like financial security of like knowing I'm about to have like money coming in.
Yeah.
And as I'm coming back from that trip, I'm like, wow, like I don't want to live my life any other way. Like I want to be on the road, climbing freaking mountains that are 13,000 feet high, meeting random people in random cities and like hiking with them. Like I was just like, I felt so alive when I go on the trips. And so then I was on my way back and I like called my dad and I'm like, dude, I'm going to get a camper van and like, that's what I'm going to make happen.
Yeah.
But then I get the job, which is like the blind security of like the 9 to 5, right? Which we can like fall into. But then I started meditating every day. And in one of my meditations, it was like a meditation on your best self. And so the meditator is like guiding you through like, okay, imagine and envision your best self. And I'm completely in that zone now where I'm lost in that trance where I'm like not, my subconscious brain is not coming up with anything. I'm in the meditation, right? And I see in my mind's eye me inside of a camper van writing books in the national parks.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it unfold. And then their voice comes in the end. It's like, welcome to your best self. And then like I open my eyes and I'm like, holy cow, I had no idea that I just was in that zone.
Yeah.
And then I start thinking of like limiting beliefs. And I'm like, oh, I had been telling myself like, oh, that can't happen for five more years.
Yep.
Oh, I can live in a camper van, but I have to have all this money first.
Yep.
Like, and so I'm starting to think of like, what are all these things that I've been telling myself? And I'm like, wait, none of that is true.
Yeah.
Not a single one of those things. And I'm like, I could have a camper van right now. All it takes is going toward that every single day.
Yeah.
And being at that energetic frequency of that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right? And like what you mentioned with like where you just felt like inclined to go camping, right? And you took that step to prioritize yourself, like, oh, this other person doesn't want to go. Wait, but I want to go. So I'm going to do it. And then from there, you just like met the right people who then got you, like this person came to you and now you're like, oh, I want to veer slightly left. And this person came to you, oh, I want to veer slightly right. And like when you follow your intuition, I think a lot of people write it off as like, oh, that's just like an idea. That's just something I want to do. But when it's your intuition telling you, you don't realize what's going to unfold when you get there. Like you don't realize like who you're going to meet and then how that's going to direct you. Like it's really this compass that tells you like each step of the way. So you don't have to worry about 100 steps from now. I'm like, how am I going to get to 100 steps from now? Because you have the compass that's like letting you know the direction right now. And then the compass will shift when you're supposed to veer, slightly to the right. And with the camper van, like as far as the, in 5 years when I have this money, like we were literally just talking before we hopped on here, how I've always wanted to have my own, like office space, where like it's so groovy and I can meet clients there and it's mine. I'm not like, a traveling resident anymore, which obviously was in itself its own, my intuition led me there and was wonderful to be this like traveling resident in metaphysical stores. But I kept thinking like, okay, well, a couple of years from now, like I need the money to like obviously get a place and pay the rent, right? And just like a couple of days ago, a place that I resonate in, the chiropractic office that I resonate in, she gave me my own room and told me to decorate it however I would like, groovy and all, even though that's not obviously how her chiropractic office looks. She was like, make it yours. It is literally yours. You can be here, every day of the week seeing people, and no rent, no charge, no fee. She just loves what I do. She wants me to be able to help as many people as I can. And she wants services for herself as compensation, which I'm like, hell yeah, I could give you that. I'll give you that all day long. I don't have money to give you, but I can give you that all day long. So like with the camper van, you never know. So like you said, to limit yourself with, oh, I need X, Y, and Z. That's a quote unquote waste of energy. And then following your intuition is like the best place to put your energy, because who freaking knows how you'll get that camper van?
Right.
Who freaking knows, or how you'll get the money to get the camper van. Like
Right.
it can be some situation might be just waiting for you to unlock. Like I met a woman who lived off the land and lived in the wilderness, and she had nothing, and like she was like gifted the land because she was like she thought she'd have to like buy land, and like how would I even have the money to start doing that? And she was like met someone because she was just following a random intuition, and she was just wandering around life with what people would think is no direction, you know, or no stability. But in that no direction and no stability was
direction and stability.
Was the direction it's meant for her.
Right.
Like how you saw yourself in that meditation. Like I feel like our intuition is just leading us more and more into ourselves and the life that we really came here to be in, that's really right for us. So I love that you're like stepping closer and closer to like, wow, this is like right. Like when I see myself at camper van writing, like this is literally like Ryanna's life. Like the life I've been living was like the life that was given to me, which is awesome, but it wasn't necessarily like this is like Ryanna's life.
Like something to claim.
Yeah.
And it's cool too, because like as you're saying, like where the direction of the intuition goes, like you never know what is needed in like your toolbox, you know what I mean? And so it's like you're gonna be led to specific places, and even if you're at a spot that maybe isn't ideal or something for a certain period of time, it's like, oh, there's something there that's needed. So the job that I recently had was being a reading and writing teacher for K through 12. And in that job, I really learned how to teach. I learned how to make lesson plans and see what a good lesson plan is to lead people, right? So in the summer, I was like content with the job. I liked the job, right? I work 5 days a week, 8.5, 9, sometimes 10 hours a day, like in my apartment. It's all like on over the computer on Zoom. And I'm just like going with it, like, yeah, this is cool. Like in the back of my mind, I know it's not something I want to do forever, because I know I have these other things in my own writing I really want to do. And then one day I wake up for work, and this is like, I'm settled in this job. Like I'm settled, right? And I'm chilling. I'm going with the flow. And I literally wake up, I start my shift, and I'm looking at the lesson plan, and I'm like, this is not what I want to do for my whole life. I have a panic attack. I literally call my dad, and I'm like, what the? I'm like, I'm locked indoors 5 days a week to teach. I'm like, this is not where I want to be. I want to be on my camper van. Like, and then I'm like, I just want to quit my job. I want to go in my car right now, and I want to go to the national parks. And he's like, okay, well, don't be crazy about this. Like, you can't go get in your car right now. But he's like, come up with a plan and like really think about it. And then I literally call out of work because I'm like, I'm taking a mental day. I hadn't even taken a day off yet since I got the job. And then I went on a hike. I just started, oh my God, I walked in my apartment. I'm like, I'm going to go walk to the nearest mountain. I'm going to climb it. And that's literally what I did. And so I'm like climbing this mountain that's like 4 miles away from my apartment, just in like the hub of Las Vegas. And then I'm like reflecting, and I'm like, oh, wow, like I needed this job because this job taught me how to be a teacher. It taught me how to look and make good writing plans so that I can teach the writing lessons that I want to do in my business. So I was like, oh, that was the purpose of it. The universe is telling me right now, and my soul is telling me, okay, you got it.
Yes.
And it's time to go.
Yes.
Like you got what you needed from this. You add that to your toolbox, and then you must go back into the unknown and like take that leap. And I'm like, oh my God, it's terrifying because it's like that money security, but even in a job that is paying you consistently every 2 weeks, like there's still no such thing as like real security. And I think the only actual security is actually going into the unknown and following that intuition.
Yes.
No matter how like terrifying it seems.
Yeah, because it understands so much more than you do of the picture. Like it's leading you to a safe place. So to you, you're like, where the hell are you taking me? And like it knows exactly where it's taking you, you know? And like I say it because there's so many different words that we have for it. You know, you can connect it to your guides, you can connect it to source, you can connect it to God, right? Like they know where they're taking you. But I love what you described, because that is something that I always try to really explain to people as far as living intuitively and getting to what I call your dream reality, which is that place where it's like, this is Ryanna's life, you know, is that thing where you enter something, right? And it's great. It's working out, you know, it's giving you whatever it's giving you. Maybe you're really happy in it, or maybe it's giving you security, whatever it is, right? Maybe it feels like your dream job, even whatever that is, you're in it. And then at some point you're like, dread. Like dread is the word I come up with.
Yeah.
It's just like it's just dread. And like a lot of people stay in that dread.
I know.
And that's how settling happens. Yeah.
Mhm.
And like it's crazy. A lot of people think like, oh, I'm like, now I have to deal with this dread. And I just have to, I have to stay. I'm
Mhm.
supposed to stay. But then it just feels like you're being punished the whole time. And you're like, I guess that life is just completely punishing me, and it freaking sucks. But when you're living intuitively, that dread is exactly how you handled it, where you're like, oh, it's time for me to go. Like I have gotten you, like, exactly, like I have gotten what I needed from this.
Mhm.
You know, this carrot was dangled in front of me and I was like, oh, this, I want it, you know, but you maybe were never meant to stay. You know, you're
Right.
meant to get certain things. And once you got the certain things, it's like, okay, let's give you all this
Right.
dread, not to punish you, but so you're like, oh,
Get your booty moving.
yes,
Yeah.
like to make it not feel right anymore. Like let's make
Right.
it feel really wrong, because it is wrong for you now. You know what I
Right.
mean? There is a new right for you. Let's get
Right.
you out of this and get you over there to that direction. But a lot of people just sit in the wrongness and they're
Mhm.
like, thinking that they have to deal with it, or being too scared to move out of it.
Mhm.
There's so many different reasons, and it would depend on everyone and who they are and what they've been through.
Mhm.
But the key thing to take away is to know that that is part of the compass. Like we think of
Right.
follow your joy, but it's also moving away from the dread. You
Mhm.
know, not like running, but literally like, this is dreadful. Wait, it feels wrong. There must be something more right out there,
Right.
you know?
Mhm.
And that's, if I stay here, I won't get that. I'll never get to that more right place for me.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. That last comment brings up another
Yes.
thing too, like
Mhm.
totally spiritual. And like, I've been doing so much just, do you know who Joe Dispenza is?
Okay, you're like, stop it. You're like the 100th person to tell me that. And then every time I'm like, no, but everyone brings them up to me, and I'm like, maybe that means I should go look them up. And then like I get distracted and I don't. And this has been happening for like 6 months. Like, yeah, 6 months where like literally clients, like everybody.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, they're like, do you know this? I'm like, well, I know his name now because
Right.
so many people
Oh
have
my
told me,
God.
and I keep thinking I should look him up. So anyway,
Yes,
remind me to go look him up.
yeah. Wait, that is seriously so funny, because like that wasn't even gonna come out of my mouth, and then I was just like, wait, you know Joseph Spencer, because this is where I've gotten this.
Oh
Like,
my God.
so he's just like super spiritual teacher, but like in a scientific way, using science to prove spirituality.
Oh, no wonder people bring him up.
Oh,
that makes so much sense.
yeah, you would love, like, he's so smart, and it's just, it's wild what he does. And so my dad has also been really on this spiritual path too. So me and him can like bounce back ideas and stuff. Oh, it's really fun. And so he'll send me like cool videos on YouTube, and then I send him, you know, some in meditations and stuff. And I believe it was like a Joe Dispenza, or at least a Joe Dispenza type video that was talking about how, like, in order for the new to come in, you have to release the old. Like, if I hold on to this job because I'm thinking that I need that security, I'm not allowing the space and time that I need to then develop into that next thing. I can never become that if I'm holding on to this. And that goes for anything, whether it's like relationships, friendships, a job. It's like, if we're holding on thinking, oh, well, we just need to sort of like, oh, it can work and we'll like make it. We're using all of our energy to stay there when there's this other reality, this other thing that, like, if I just opened up, boom. And so like I had told my job, like, so that next like round of classes for 6 weeks, I was like, I have to go down to part-time. I can only work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So then I went to 24 hours a week instead of 40. That left 4 days in a row, Monday through Thursday, where all I had was complete open space, my creativity. I literally get everything done for like getting my business, you know, like all the nitty gritty stuff, of like getting a business, like I know all that fun stuff. But like, I was just, you get in the zone of it, you do it. And like, next thing I know, like even 3 weeks into that, I'm like, wait, I have a business and I already have workshops up and I have all my books online. Like, it just happen. And then and then now like I have 2 weekends left of that job, and then I'm like, wow, like I'm opening up into that reality. I wouldn't have been able to do that had I have just thought that I must need this. Like, even though I have no money security at all in what I'm going into, but I'm like, I know that my intuition is absolutely leading me there and was leading me away, and like release this and go into that.
Yes. It's like there's no ceiling like when you follow your intuition, because I think financials is a big thing that gets in our way, and it's completely valid to get in our way. But like when you have that security, and as amazing as that is and as necessary as it is sometimes 100%, that's the cap. You know what I mean? So, and we get scared to follow that intuition because it's like an unknown number, and it's an unknown process of where those financials come into play. But ultimately there's no ceiling with it. You know, like, yeah, you don't know how much you're getting paid, but also
you don't know
how much you're getting paid. You don't know how expansive that will really end up being for you.
Right.
And like, I love what you were saying with like you use all your energy to stay where you're at, especially when it comes to that dread time, you know, because that's your compass telling you it's time to move on and time to leave. It takes so much energy and resistance to like stay at that time. And it's like, how could you ever build up that security of, you know, what you really want, or the security of leaving this thing you don't like? You don't have any energy to. Like, I tell people, because people all the time will ask if I'm doing this market or this event or whatever, and I'm like, I used to do pop-ups all the time. I was doing like 3 pop-ups a week, and that was my sole source of income. And during the time, I loved it, and it was great, and that's how I made any of my money to be able to pay my bills. And it was wonderful and so great for my business. And then all of a sudden I hated it and I dreaded it. And it was so hard to get myself to go. I felt like I was forcing myself to go to everything. And then I suddenly stopped like making money at them. Like, I had never not normally it was just flourishing. It just was really meant to be, you know? And like, then I wasn't making money at them, and it was just like awful. And I just had to leave the whole thing. And I didn't have any new source of income. That was my full source of income. But I tell people now, I'm like, I knew that I was dreading that. I hated it. And I wanted to be able to make money in different ways and like grow in the ways that I was receiving money in my business, and the way I was working with people. How would I ever be able to do that if all of my energy was doing the pop-ups to try to make, you know, the bare minimum to survive? I needed to cut all of it off, not knowing how the hell I was going to get money, because then it would force me to then get into, okay, like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? But if I tried to keep the pop-ups on my schedule, it's like, how would I ever have like the time and energy to do that? And like, thank God, you know, and then, yeah, I had to build that up, and it was uncomfortable and everything, but I couldn't keep doing that forever. I would end up in that same level of dread that I would have at like old jobs and like 9 to 5, even being an entrepreneur. You know, entrepreneurs can end up in that same cycle. Yeah.
Okay. There was something you just said, and I'm like, wait, I got to go back to that moment you said. I remembered it. Okay. You were talking about how you have to get into this space to be able to like ask yourself those questions, like those hard questions to yourself of like, okay, wait, so actually, how am I going to get money? Like, what is my next move? And I feel like that's such an important part of the process, because I'm like, even whether that is about like just jobs, which is what we're talking about, but like even relationships, like through a breakup, a really hard breakup, you're able to actually like sit and ask yourself, oh, wait, like what actually would be aligned with me? Like, what actually do I want to call in? Like, what kind of person do I want to attract into my sphere? Like, what is the next method of how I could get money? Like, and having that ability to actually confront yourself with those big questions, you get to know yourself more, but then you end up expanding and seeing so many opportunities. Like I remember, with my road opener candle, actually, that you got me, which I love. Okay, this is a great story for the podcast listeners. So like 2 years ago, for a present, Alex gets me it's called road opener, right?
Yes. Shout out House of Intuition.
Road opener candle. It's like this super spiritual, intuitive candle. And she's like, oh yeah, I got this for you. And like, I just feel like you've got all these roads opening up, like who knows what road you're gonna take. And like I'm not even in that realm yet of thinking that way, understanding that. Like I would not like this and sit in front of this candle. There's just it's not even where I am. And I'm just like,
I see you as like your energy.
You see my higher self.
I'm like, oh my God, you're totally all the potential. Like I feel it, and you're like, what are you?
And I'm just like, oh, I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. Like I love, and like the spiritual aspect of me completely receives that gift. Is like, wow, I love this. I'm like, ooh, that's so cool. I'm like, thanks, Alex. This candle is sitting in my bedroom at my parents' house where I live for a year and a half. I moved to Vegas. Of course, I bring it with me. Like this is, and the cap has never come off of it. It's like sitting like that. I've never even lifted up, never lit it or anything. So then I literally bring it to Vegas. I'm just living my life. And then all these things start happening, right? That I've mentioned, like the meditation where I'm seeing myself in the camper van, the limiting belief, like stepping out of those. And like gonna quit my job, step into the unknown, right? And then one day I'm literally just walking around listening to this like high vibe music, like Trevor Hall and the Beautiful Chorus. And I'm just like cleaning my apartment and walking around. I've got sage. And then I look over and I see the candle and I'm like, I've had this thing for 2 years. Like, let me go look at it. I literally read the back. And then I also think it's so funny because it's literally called Road Opener. As I'm going to go on the road and be in a camper van. And I like read the back and it's like, and it's explaining the whole ritual of like how to light it and like pray over it and like have an altar. And then I literally do it. Like I'm in a space now, like spiritually, right? Yeah. So I get all the vibes around my apartment. Like there's this song that is all about like, it just gives me complete open road. You have no worries. You're carefree and like you've got to trust the universe, right? I've got this song that's like on that vibe. So I put that song on repeat on Alexa. I've saged the house. I got Palo Santo. I've put an altar out with everything in my life that is just like going toward this future reality. And I light the candle. I'm praying over it. I'm like crying, having this whole spiritual experience, right? And then it says, keep the candle burning. Like for days that you have to leave and like you obviously don't want the candle burning, like then you just put it out, but light it anytime you're in your space with the altar and everything. Oh, and I have like a list of intentions underneath it too, right? Yeah. So I anytime I leave, I take it out, like I light it whenever I'm home. It takes like 3 days to like completely dissolve. And I feel the like energetic frequency of all these intentions. I've just done like a spell, like a ritual. Like, but it's so funny because I'm just like, I never would even imagine myself. And you probably know, remember, I used to always be like, I don't know if I believe all that kind of stuff. Like, and then I text Alex afterwards and I'm like, Alex, I just lit your road opener candle. I'm thinking about how you intuitively got me this gift, you guys, 2 freaking years in advance of when it's going to be. I said, Alex, are you God? I'm just wondering. That is the funniest thing. So, and if you were wondering if you need a reading, this is your woman to go to because she's got all the insights, seriously. But I love that. That was a tangent we went off on, but I'm like, I love that candle. I love that moment. That's so funny to me. And I'm like, how could someone be so intuitive? So it's just some gratitude, yeah.
I thought it was the coolest thing ever too, that it was road opener, because at the time I got it for you, the camper van and that dream was not even a thing. It hadn't like come to you yet. You know, so I love how literal it ended up being. When it was the right time to actually use it, it was like so literal. I just thought that was the funniest thing.
I know. I tell you, I'm like, do you remember that Kindle you got me 2 years ago? Like, that's so funny. I forget where was I mentioning before that? Because I was totally like, I thought of it and I went off on explaining it.
I know, because there's something you said that totally like I hadn't heard it spoken in that way before. So I wanted to like reiterate it because I loved it. And it was like, when you were talking about how when we hold on to like where we are and that, takes all our energy from getting to where we need to go. And you were saying that like when you're in that space and you're trying to then think of, okay, well then what am I doing next? And how is that going to work? that's why it's so hard to do that, because you're still in that old space and you're
Right.
still around those old energies. You have all those old attachments. You got all of that, just like quote unquote last chapter, like junk, like all
Right.
around you. So it's really hard to think like, oh, well, I'll step out of this once I have that plan. That's why it's so hard for us to do that, is
Mhm.
because we're not in the headspace and everything to have the plan. We're in like this old headspace that we need to be leaving. And when we leave and get some fresh air,
Right.
like fresh start, fresh air, then the plan like becomes so much more clear. And the
Mhm.
what do we even want? Because sometimes you don't even know what you're leaving for. Like you just know you need
Right.
to leave. And
Right.
that happens
Right.
a lot. Like you're just like, that's why when I quit my job and started my business, I didn't leave thinking, I have this business. I didn't have the business. I didn't think I needed to start a business. I didn't know. I just had so much dread, and I knew
Mm.
that I wasn't going to be someone who settles in it, and I was just going to let the dread guide me. So I just like left. But there was no inkling of what I wanted to do. So I feel like that was such an important way that you said it, is that because everyone's always like, oh, you can't know the plan. Like once you leave, then you get to know, like you have to trust. Like it comes down to trust a
Mhm.
lot. But I think a good way of looking at it too is like it's really hard to make the plan. How do you have those ideas and that intuition, that inspiration come to you when you're in that old energy? You're surrounded by all these old things that don't line up at all with the new thing.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
how are you gonna have that like come in? How are you gonna have that clarity on that? You think of
Exactly.
yourself as literally stepping outside, like getting a breath of fresh air, like when you have arguments in your home, or when you're really depressed at home, like the difference that we all feel when we finally get ourselves. It's hard to. We're like, I want to
Right.
stay here, even though I feel awful and it's horrible. But when we
Right.
finally like rip ourselves out and get ourselves to step outside, we're like, oh my fucking god.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
what I love too about, and this is like kind of like in the realm of what we talked about, like stepping out into that unknown. Like I
Mhm.
talk about like that ceiling or that
Mhm.
cap. When
Mhm.
you see that there's no cap on
Mhm.
anything in your life,
Mhm.
you realize that you literally are limitless. Like there is
Yeah.
nothing in any
Mhm.
realm that you can't call into
Mhm.
your sphere. Like, so one thing that's been like guiding me is whenever I have like any fear come up about like, oh God, but what about the money? How am I get the camper
Mhm.
van? Like, cause I know, okay, my who, what, where, when, why questions,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to
Mhm.
answer.
Mhm.
Like I don't know. And
Yeah.
as you mentioned, like the intuition's guiding you. So
Mhm.
then I'll like tap in my higher self and be like,
Mhm.
what would you be thinking in this moment?
Mhm.
And then my higher self is like, what are all the ways money could come into your sphere? Like write them
Mhm.
down.
Yeah.
And I literally took out a sheet of paper in my apartment. I'm just writing down anything that comes to my
Mhm.
mind. I came up with a list of 30 things. And I'm like, and none of them had to do with like the security of a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, your book could blow up
Uh-huh.
on Amazon, or like,
Yeah.
oh, your writing workshops
Mhm.
will take off. Oh, you
Mhm.
start doing pop-up events.
Mhm.
You decide that you want to make a Spotify like podcast. I couldn't think of the word. I'm like, what is this?
What
I'm like, what is this that we're on right now?
are you doing here?
Right. And it's like, and then that could like you literally have no idea. And then literally it's like, oh, you could write like holiday poems for
Uh-huh.
like men who want like
Mhm.
love poems for their wives. I'm like, that's the randomest idea
Oh
ever.
my god, I love that
Right.
idea.
But I'm like, that's so cute. And I'm like, and these ideas are just coming
Uh-huh.
in.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this list and I'm like, oh yeah, I have nothing to worry about. Look at
Yeah.
that. That was in a 5-minute burst of let
Mhm.
me just write down any way money could come into my sphere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, like, what is
Yeah.
there to worry about? Like, look
Mhm.
at what's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
I love
crazy.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
with intuition and like the ability to know that you'll take the action,
Mhm.
like you can do any of those things and like you can make all of it
Right.
happen, like the combination of the two. And like fear is totally a factor and like totally valid, but that's where like helping yourself and working on yourself comes in, because I feel like sometimes it gets confusing on what is spirituality and just like the
Mm.
attracting things in and the energy, but then when it comes to like the actions that you need or even the trust that you need,
Mhm.
you're like, oh great, spirituality, all these things, okay, but then as a human now, like trust needs to get involved and you're like, I can't, like you like sometimes you just feel like I physically can't, like your body and mind like don't let you because of
Right.
the fear and everything like that. And then that's where like the working on yourself comes in, whether that be in like a more
Mhm.
spiritual direction or mental health direction, but like that is where that like self-improvement comes in, so that you can actually start to feel more safe to trust, you can start to feel more safe to take action. And yeah, I love just like blending the two together, but for whatever reason that was coming to me, it's important to say.
No, I love that. And like it totally made me think of things like the first word that came to mind is like co-creating. Like you're co-creating your reality. Like you have to take aligned action while also like knowing where the line is of like what do you trust and just know is gonna come in naturally by trusting in your intuition and trusting the universe, you know. And like it made me think of this great thing I saw. It was like a video on Instagram, and it was like, let's say you're late to the bus stop and you could be praying to God, source, universe, you know, any whatever name you want to say the whole time. Please let me make the bus. I really want to get home on time tonight, like to have dinner with my husband. And you could be praying that whole time, but you're walking to the bus. When you get there, if the bus is gone, it's like, oh, there was something more you could have done. You could have ran. So you need to be praying to the universe, source, but also running your ass off to that bus. Because then when you get there, if it's there, it's like, oh my God, I made the aligned action and I was trusting. And I got there. And if the bus is gone, you at least know that you did your best and you're going to get the next bus anyways. So it's like, that is a really good way to just look at anything in life. Like, yes, you need to have that trust and that faith and like that, you know, prayer and ritual and all that. But then also it's like, where are the spots where like you have to be the one making that action? Because it can't just be like, I want $1 million. Like, I want to be rich. It's like, okay, like you can't just manifest that in. Like, what are your limiting beliefs? What do you need to work on? And what do you need to go toward? How would you make that happen for yourself? It's like a co-creation of life.
I love it. Like the universe is like, okay, cool. We're waiting on you. You know, like we have it. We've got it right here.
Okay. We're waiting for you to make that step.
Exactly. I love that. Something that I definitely want to ask you while you're here, because I feel like it was such a life-changing time for you, is your switch. And this is kind of, I feel like how the life-changing time manifested, but your switch from poetry into having your debut novel. So I know that is a writing question, but I know it all stems from so much personal, complete,
you're So I was just talking to my dad about this last night too, which is interesting. So I was completely believing and setting on the fact that like, I'm going to be a poet. I'm going to be a famous poet. My poetry is going to go down in history. Like that is my path. And I'm like, just totally thinking that way. And then lo and behold, someone enters my life. The way they've impacted me cannot be contained into a poem. And I'm trying to write a poem. And I'm like, I've got 2 pages on a journal and I'm like, this is the worst poem in the world, because you can't get all the emotion, all the energy and creativity and lessons and everything I've learned from this. It can't be in a poem.
It's too expansive.
And so then I'm like, I need to write a book. And so then I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm gonna do it. And the whole time I'm like, I also want this person to read this book. They're not a big reader, but I'm like, I want them to read this book. I also want them to see this movie because they are a big movie person. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write a book that's so good that it's gonna get picked up for a movie, then it's gonna be in the movie theater, and then this person can go see it in the movie theater. And so I really did write it from that energetic frequency though, of like, I am gonna write a book that it has to be so good. Like I don't want to write something and put it out that is just like, ooh, that's bad writing. And my writing was terrible. The first draft, it was the worst. It was so bad. It's super choppy. It's mainly all dialogue, but not a lot of scenes or imagery. And then I end up working on it for 2.5 years. And the whole time I'm just in full communication with my higher self, with the universe. They're writing like notes to me, like, keep going. You've got a piece of gold on your hands. Like, keep going. You've got it. Like, don't stop until this is at literally the level of perfection that you want it to be. And I'm like, okay. And so I keep going. And then it's like 2.5 years later, I just like, it's resonating. It's right. It's the time. And I like look at the first draft compared to the last. I look at like the first scene of the book and I'm like, you would not even recognize like the difference of the two. And I'm like, okay, this is just absolutely crazy. But the amount of like intuition and like communion with like my higher self that went into that book is crazy. And I didn't even know it at the time. Like I didn't even know this was like a complete act of spirituality.
Yeah.
And like the whole time, like my higher self is literally like writing notes down every email correspondence. There's like millions of email correspondences from me to me.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God, I love that.
And I didn't realize that they were like pushing me forward toward a certain reality of that book where like I can actually be a full-time writer and not really poetry, but actually just like novels and memoirs and full like length books. And now when I have that creativity, I'm not getting ideas for poems ever anymore. But I realize like, oh, I have to let that go. It's the same thing. It's like, and just like you had mentioned, like you didn't like pop-ups, like poetry's not the full thing. Like it's just like you have to let it go to allow for the more aligned thing to come in, which I never saw coming. And like if you asked 3 years ago me, like you call her up and be like, you're not gonna write poems anymore, I would have cried and be like, what do you mean? But I'm like, oh, I don't even mind not having that anymore because like this is so much more aligned with my life, you know?
Oh my God, that's what I love to I call them carrots, like because I picture like a bunny on a treadmill or whatever, you know, like where you're dangling like the carrot of like, oh, like I'm gonna write this to be a movie because I want this person to see it in a movie theater, you know. So the universe is dangling this carrot and you're like, that is what I want, you know. But it's really leading you to something so much bigger, you know. Even poetry in the first place, you know, was like a carrot. You like loved it and it was amazing, but it was this bridge to become so much more as like a writer and an author. And I feel like the phrase that's coming to me as you're talking was like employed by the universe. You know, like they employed they like employed you to do this, like how they kept like encouraging you and you know, they're like they were being channeled like into the novel, like you're like employed by the universe. They're like your agency telling you to write this book.
And it's so crazy too. This is another thing with the book, like I remember really thinking like, oh, the only way this book is going to be successful and at that level where like someone will take it seriously and it will be like a New York Times bestseller and be a movie. Like that is the energetic frequency that I wrote the book at. Like that book carries that energetic frequency of like, it's going to be a New York Times bestseller and it's going to be a movie. I have no doubt in my mind that this story will be a movie one day. And as I'm writing, I'm like, okay, the only way someone will take it seriously at that level though is if it's published by a publishing company. So I keep trying to reach out to people and I seriously get over 100 rejections. Everyone's rejecting me. Reject. Oh
my God.
And I'm like, what am I going to do? Because like, who's going to take me seriously? So then I'm visualizing my future self and it's not like a guided one. I'm like laying down one day and I'm like, I'm going to get in touch with like my future self, my higher self. And I'm like, okay, imagine my book being a book, real, tangible, real life. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, so imagine sending an email where someone accepts it. And I, for the life of me, cannot imagine an email where someone accepts it. It will literally not come in. I cannot even visualize it. And I'm like, okay, well then what do you visualize? And I'm like, I see me with a stack of my books that I have completely created all on my own. It was me and the universe, no one else getting in the way of this creative line. It's my book that I've copy edited myself. I have done all the writing. I've made the cover. I've designed everything. I've formatted everything. I've chosen every song inside. Like I have done every single thing, just me and my line of communication. And I'm like, oh, so it was never meant to involve other people or involve an agency or involve a publisher or someone who's going to go try and get it picked up. Like I want to do it all on my own. So then I'm like, okay, what's my like next step? And I'm like, well, I need to get it in like book form. I need to figure out like the cover. And I'm like, okay, like it's gonna, you know, I'm going to trust this path I'm on. And then one day it's pouring down rain in Vegas. And I'm like, okay, higher self, like, what would you want to do today? And then my higher self was like, ooh, dress in a really cute outfit and go dance on top of a mountain in the rain. I'm like, ooh, that's so much fun, girl. Let's go do it. So I like put on this outfit. I'm like, oh, that one doesn't fit. Like it doesn't like look right. You know, it's not the fit of like what I'm going for. And then I put on this other outfit and then I'm just like, ooh, this is like totally the vibes. Like this is what I'm supposed to wear on this mountain. So then I'm on the way to the mountain thinking that that's just my whole reason of going is like, that's
Yeah.
what my higher self wants to do today
Yeah.
is go dance on a mountain.
Uh-huh.
And then the universe literally comes in and is
Uh-huh.
like, oh, also, by the way, you're going to take the front cover image of your novel today.
Oh
And
my
I'm like,
God.
what? And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
So then I literally know exactly where I'm going in the Red Rock Canyon. I've
Mhm.
been there before. It's like this beautiful mountaintop. And then I get to the top and I remember like these lines from my novel that are
Mhm.
really integral to like main themes and like a really important image. Like the lines include, I can't give it away, but they
Mhm.
include a mountain and a girl alone on a mountain.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, here I am,
Here I am, just a girl
alone
on the
on
mountain.
the mountain. And I'm like, oh, that's literally insane. Like, it's
Yeah.
so crazy where that intuition will take you to the most completely aligned and guided places if
Yeah.
you just get quiet
Uh-huh.
and listen to it.
Yeah.
So I set my phone up and I literally took the picture with my freaking my
Oh my
iPhone.
gosh, yeah, it looks amazing.
It's so well.
Yeah.
That was the first shot.
Uh-huh.
That was the first shot I took.
Oh my God, stop. What?
Uh-huh. How wild is that?
That's wild.
So I set up the camera.
What? The first shot you took?
I set up the camera and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna walk out. I put it on a 10-second timer. I'm like, I'm going to get in the vibes of the main girl character, Rachel. And I'm like, so I get in her energy, embodying her, and I'm looking out and I like hold on to the side of the skirt. I walk back, I look at the picture, the camera lens has focused on this rock in the front and slightly blurred the whole rest of the picture.
Yeah.
And it's like the most like beautiful picture I've ever seen. And I'm looking at it and like all the angles and everything. Like I know like there's like that thirds rule with cameras and everything. And I'm like, and it like has complete like, and I was completely not,
yeah,
you know, like
I
just
shot really.
Yeah, like I just walked out and I didn't know I was gonna be in the perfect spot of the frame, but then I was. And the camera like just takes this incredible photo, and then literally my intuition tells me like, okay, that's the one.
There you go.
Right. And then me like just being the human me, I'm like, I should just take some more just in case. I literally sit there, I take like 200 photos, no joke, look back through all of them, and then like my intuition's like, I told you that was the one. I'm like,
I do that all the time. Like, note with intuition, like as far as like that human part that comes in, I'm like, it's fine. Like we're just like stubborn sometimes. Yeah. You know, because people ask me and I'm like, I follow my intuition like all day long, every day. And like when I don't, it doesn't work out. And then people are like, well, then like even Rob will be like, why like you know that it's right. Why didn't you listen? I'm like we're human and sometimes I'm just stubborn. I'm just like exactly what you did. Let me take some more, you know, and then I end up taking more and I pick that one anyway. You know, I'll do that all the time with things. And then it's just like, okay, that was kind of a waste of time. Okay, like they were, you know, my intuition was trying to like spare me that energy and that time. But that's so cool that like it all started with this really random intuitive notion where like I'm gonna go out in the rain in this dress and like that's why I say like I don't care how silly or how little or irrelevant like things that seem so irrelevant to your overall goal, like if it's your intuition telling you, like just do it. Just do it. It's gonna be for the best. It's going to be on purpose. You know, how no matter how silly or irrelevant it seems.
Right? Yeah, like in that moment, I'm just thinking like, okay, like sure. But then it's just like there's this bigger plan or bigger idea. And then I'm just like, you're funny. Like the universe is just funny too. Like just like the road opener kind of like you can be so literal. Like I'm just like, you're hilarious. Yeah.
It's like the just like the ease, you know what I mean? I feel like some of it is just sparing the ease so you do have more energy to like enjoy life or to put in the direction that you really want to go. Like this is so random, but the ease of what you were saying with like that first shot and everything reminded me of how on Saturday I'm going to this concert with Rob because we listen to this morning show like every day, like on the radio. And we love it. They're so funny. And we even listen to like the podcast version to like get all of it in because we just love it so much. And they're always doing like, oh, call in to win these tickets, call in to win this. And we've never done it. We've never even thought about doing it, right? Because we're just enjoying the show. Never crossed our mind. One day we're driving and there's all these things that lead up to it where we shouldn't be at this car at the time. And we shouldn't have been listening as early as we were, but we tried something new because we intuitively thought like all these things that were already intuitive and we didn't realize it were set up. And then we're in the car And this song comes on, and Rob's like, oh, that's the song that you call in for. He's like, I know that because this was our first time setting the morning show as our alarm in the morning, like 2 hours ago, and whatever, right? And he was like, oh, should we call in? And I'm like, you know what? That's a good idea. Maybe we should start calling in. Like, we listen so often, every time they do a thing, we should call in. There's probably a good chance that eventually we'll win something. And I'm like, here, I'll look up the number right now. Right. So I look up the number. In the meanwhile, the song is like playing, and you're supposed to be like caller 20 or whatever. It's just like going on. I'm in no rush or anything. I look up the number to the morning show, and we're like, let's call it. So we call it, and we win the tickets.
Oh my God.
We win the fucking tickets. We were so confused. So
That
confused
is
when they
so
told us.
funny.
They literally like, what did you win? And I'm like, tickets. And they're like, tickets to what? And I'm like, the concert. I don't know. I'm nervous. Like, that's what I said on the radio.
Oh my God.
What is happening? What is happening? Like, we were just
Oh
like
my
doing a test run, like, oh, we should start calling it. We
my-
listen so much, right?
The funniest thing I've
We
ever heard.
win the tickets, and like on
Oh
air
my
we said
God.
how we've never called before, which like I'm sure people were so mad at us, but it's so funny because like now when I hear people call in, whether it's that show or just other like radio shows, everyone is like, I have been trying, like I have been calling all week for this. Some people are like, I try every year for like this, for this ticket, because they do the same like ticket every year.
Yeah.
And that was our first time ever picking up, not even just picking up the phone, but even thinking about it.
Right.
And like just think
That's
of like
so funny.
when you're in line with your intuition and you've gone to the place where you're really just living by it and trusting it, it's so incredible. Because think of like, if we weren't, we'd be like, ooh, I want tickets to this thing, or I want to win. So we're calling in all the time. We're getting the busy line, and we're frustrated. We keep trying and trying and trying. But like when you're living with that intuition, you literally never even think about it. And then one day you're just like, oh, maybe we should call. And then you just get handed tickets. Like literally, it feels so weird that we're going to this concert. I'm like, we literally just called a number and we're handed tickets.
Yeah,
Like,
that's so funny.
And I feel like it's ingrained in me. And now when I hear other like giveaways, I'm like, oh, we should just call, because like when you call, apparently you just get
right. Apparently,
like,
that's the move now.
the
Right.
ease is like so in my body, and like
Right.
that's what you live with. It's so it's so mind blowing, the stark contrast between someone who isn't living by that, trying to get those tickets, and it not lining up and it not working out. And even if you eventually get it, I mean, you've tried for years, or you've been calling in like all day, you know what I mean?
Right.
Versus just like living by it, and you just like pick up the phone one day and like get your tickets.
Right. Yeah. Like there's just such ease that comes with intuition. And even if it like puts us in specific places where we might be like, what or how, like it's just the road it takes you on. It's like, and like you said, like it's just this ease that comes with it of like, oh
yeah,
here's like it's just a part of the ride.
And like you work for that ease, you know what I mean? Like the work that goes in isn't all of the trying and the forcing and the shoulds and that kind of work, but the work is like, oh, okay, I know that I need to leave this thing, but I'm scared, let's figure out how I can just pull the trigger on this and do it, and quit or leave this relationship, or, I really need to work on myself with this. Like there's a lot of things coming up, and like, I need to do this inner work that seems really hard. Like that's like the work that comes into play, and like that's like the action, like we're talking about. It's not just like, oh cool, you're in this and then you're just floating around. Like there is work and like action, but it's such a different kind of work than the forcing and
there's so much more like fun and excitement, I feel like, that comes with it, because like I was talking about, like, oh, we take a left turn, we take a right turn. Like it's not just like I work this 9 to 5 and I go to this job every day and I go home and I'm in this dread. Like it's just like everything it's like fun and exciting and new, and you're always like being taken to new places, and it's like you don't know what comes next when you're like living in that unknown, but that's what makes it so fun, you know? Like, and like when I'm thinking of like, okay, I've got like 2 weeks left at this job, and then I'm like, I literally have no obligations. Like after that final day, December 17th,
you're like literally at 2 weeks of my
right? Like literally that door and like my life is completely open. I'm like, I could literally get into my car and go drive to Yellowstone National Park, which is what I want to do. And what I was thinking, hey, I might go do that because I'm like, I literally just can. And I'm like, to be in that place of like trust in the universe, just know like, oh, like I am opening up that field. I'm going into the unknown. And like, there are no shackles on my life.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's the most beautiful and freeing thing. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to trust and be open and follow the path because that is the path that has literally been designed for me. Like you have put all of the heartache and the trauma and everything I've had to endure, like all the mental health stuff I ever went through growing up, like is like, this has all led me to being on this aligned path where I can then help people in the best way I can. Like, and it's just like, no one else could do that exact job. That's my job, you know? And like, we all have one of those, like just for us at the universe. It's like, oh, there's like, you know, your path.
Yeah.
Like you could take a path but you can have your, remember I said that to you. I was like, yeah, for a while I was thinking like, oh, do I follow the traditional path or mine? LOL.
Like, yeah, she was literally like, we were having a reading and she was like asking me, she's like, yeah, like I'm just really torn between if I should follow the traditional path or like my path. And I'm like, what? I'm like,
wait a minute.
Literally just called it yours. It was like, oh, the traditional path or this other way, like it like claimed it as like her own path. I'm like, I think that one.
Yeah, you're like, that's an interesting observation. The traditional path where there's thousands and thousands of people thinking that that's like the way, the traditional path, or mine.
Or
like,
mine.
Mine one is a tough one.
That's a tricky one, Ryanna.
That's a tricky one.
Oh my god,
conundrum here. Yeah, so fun. I know that's funny that I just remembered that, but yeah, like, and it just like knowing that the more you follow it too, and like you really will get led on it. You watch it just unfold, like the next step. Like you don't need to do, like as you said, you don't need to know 100 steps in advance. Like you will get what you need when you need it, and you'll get like the next like overlay of like what's to come, you know.
Yeah, and you get a lot better at having that be your process, you know, because at first your process is not that way. Your process is like, let's say with what's secure, let's say with what's known. So like as you do it, you know, it's the hardest at first, you know, with all of the fear and all of the, you know, I don't know if this is my intuition or not, like all of that gets easier and easier, like as you continue on the path, because you start to recognize like the way that the path works. You start to learn how to read the compass more easily and like trust it more easily. So it's like now when I have like those feelings of dread and whatnot, I'm like, oh, okay, this is coming to a close. And then like one day, and I'll be able to like process it and know like, okay, this is coming. And then one day it'll just be like at that pinnacle, like how you felt at your job where you're like you took the day off, like it was just like all hit you, you know, then I'll have that day and I'm like, okay, you know, I already kind of felt inklings of this come in, I'm ready and I'm done. And I'll just like cut it off and I'm literally done. Like I'll reach out to whoever and I'm like, you know, thank you for everything. Like I don't like I'm like it's done. Like it's out of my life. Not like the okay, so how long should I continue? How long should I be in so like the more you live your life that way, the more it just you get to make your turns when they come up so much more easier. Yeah. You don't have to like stay in this dread and debate everything and like awful. And so it's totally valid if that's how it feels at first. Like that's how it felt for me at first. And it was overwhelming and confusing. But the more you follow it, the more you're just like, oh, that's literally how I live my life. And like, that's how I navigated. And like, this is what we do now. Like when this happens, this is now what, you know, I do to follow it.
Right. I was gonna say another great thing too, is you'll start to realize how different, you know, whether it's like your higher self or spiritual guides or just universe, like you'll see how they communicate with you. Cause it's not obviously, I mean, sometimes I really will get like audio or like visual, but like sometimes it's just like an intuitive thing of like, oh, like when a specific thing happens, you now know the next move, like, oh, that means this. Yeah. You know, and like the farther you go on that path, you like will see like, oh, and or like if you see a specific even set of angel numbers, like, oh yeah, when I see that, like I know it means this. Like it's almost like you can have a directory in your own life to know like what something means for you on your path.
Yeah, it's true. Like you start to learn how to read like the map and the compass and the keys of the map and It's so cool that you said like how you'll get like auditory and visual sometimes, because you said something earlier where I'm like, oh man, I need to tell Ryanna that she's really tapping into her like psychicness. Because when you said with the publishing where you were talking to your future self and you're trying to visualize that acceptance letter, and like you literally couldn't, that is like that psychic ability, because you couldn't, because it's not there,
Right.
like you could sense that like, oh, that's not how it goes down, and like I love that. I love that. And like when you start to get more intuitive, like that's such a cool part of it, is that like Rob will say something like, oh, maybe we should go on this little road trip or whatever, and I'm like, okay, and then I'll be like, no, and he's like, oh, you don't want to go? And I'm like, no, it's not that I don't want to go, but I'm like, I don't see it. Like, I don't see it. I don't feel it. And then it's just easier, instead of going down this whole rabbit hole of trying to plan it and does it work, and then it ends up not coming to, it's just like, I don't see it, or,
Right.
the opposite, like, oh, like, do you want to do this? And like, I can sense it. And I'm just like, yeah, that's what we end up doing.
Right.
Or he's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't even think of what I want to do so much as like, I feel like, what do we end up doing?
Right.
And then like, I'll feel it. And I'm like, ooh, let's go get sushi. And he's like, oh my God, that is perfect. And I'm like, yeah, that's what,
Right,
like, I just cuts a lot of the middleman out. I feel like.
Yeah, it does.
Uh-huh.
I'm glad you bring that up too, about the psychic, because like I have always known, a part of me has known at least, that I like have that or can tap into that, but then like I haven't, or like, oh, it's like spiritual woo woo. Like I just like so badly, just whether because of societal expectations, or like, oh, it's not, how can you just go off like into the unknown? Like, like, oh, trusting your intuition, that's not smart, and so then it's like I'm capping myself in that way. But then once I stopped, it was like, oh, suddenly like I will have like bursts and moments where like my clair senses are coming in like very strong, and like I will be like clairvoyant, or I will have like clair, what is clair
audience,
thank you, or clairsentience. I will feel like, and I'm like, oh my God, I am like tapping into abilities that are like beyond this one human body. It's like part of that like oneness of like consciousness. And I'm like, it's just wild. It's wild, and it's fun, and to like continue developing them, and like learning more about them.
I am so excited. I literally predicted, and Ryanna knows this, I predicted this for Ryanna like 2.5 years, probably 3 years ago, 3 years ago, in like one of our like first or second like readings. And it like, I predicted this exact thing, and I knew it would take a long time, and I said that, and it like there was a cycle that she kept going in, and I was like, I'm like, you're gonna keep falling into this, like I'm sorry, I'm like, you could choose not to, but it's gonna be really hard, and like I do see how you would easily keep falling into it, and that's valid, but the more you follow into it, the harder it'll be to leave. But once you do summon the strength and the readiness and everything to leave, that is like, you are like psychic, and you find like exactly what you want to be doing, and like you are just like, you feel like you're on the right path, and just all of it. But obviously more specifics, because it was her in her personal life, and that's what you've done, and that's where you're at now.
It's crazy.
You made it to the end of that reading.
Right, I know. And it's so funny, because I remember like I had texted you in the summer, and I was like, remember that reading from like 2.5 years ago? Well, guess what? Like, it's literally happening. Like, I have my own business, and I'm like gonna go off on the road in the camper van. Like, I'm just like, it's so wild. It's like funny, how we talk. And like all the like clair senses was like an added bonus. Like I didn't even know I was gonna like tap into all of that. I think also going out into nature like brought that on too, because like that was on my Utah trip, was where I got like a really strong sense of like the clairaudience. And then I was like, oh wow, like I was looking at this like huge gaping hole. Which national park was it? Oh my gosh. I can't think of the name. It's right next to Arches, but it's not Arches. There's two in that city, but Canyonlands.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a Grand Canyon type look of like just this massive gaping hole in all these rocks. And I literally like go to sit down, and like God's like literally in my ear, like come sit with me for a while. And I'm like, what? And then I'm like, I'm not gonna sit here. I have all these like trails to go on. And then I left. But then I keep thinking of like that
Mhm.
voice and that like
Yeah.
intuitive message of like, what was gonna happen
Mhm.
if I sat down in that stillness and was
Yeah.
like sitting there, like looking out into
Mhm.
that gaping hole of
Mhm.
earth.
Mhm.
And then after that was when I was like, oh, I'm gonna allow myself to be
Mhm.
more open, be more aware of like,
Yeah.
what are these
Uh-huh.
voice, like
Uh-huh.
this voice and this like knowing
Uh-huh.
or this feeling or this
Mhm.
visual, like
Mhm.
what is that? Where does it come
Yeah.
from?
Uh-huh.
And I should really sit and listen and like
Yeah.
look and
Mhm.
hear, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I could go on and on, but I have to now be aware of time and wrap things
Yeah.
up because this has been so like just like catalyzing, and I love it, and I hope that you feel this, and I hope that you got like certain nuggets or just like
Mhm.
the energy and the hype of everything. But as we wrap up, I definitely want to allow you to share if there was any like little tidbit or like takeaway or anything that you would just like to be able to give to people, maybe to practice or to think on.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think realizing that oftentimes fear is actually the door that's leading to an unknown that is
Mhm.
going to expand your life.
Mhm.
And fear, we end up like we could hide away and go inward into ourself, or you can actually open that door and see what's behind it and
Mhm.
allow yourself to go into that fear
Mhm.
because it's probably a new reality and a higher
Yeah.
self and a higher timeline for you.
Yeah.
So I encourage everyone, do
Uh-huh.
something that is going to have you challenge your fear.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I feel that, and I feel
Mhm.
like it's true. And like sometimes the fear comes because deep down you can sense that there's like the winds of change or this new thing on the horizon, and it's all good things for you. So definitely don't let the fear make you think that it is a bad thing. The fear might just be sensing that there is something different that you haven't experienced before, and it's usually something wonderful. But to fear, it doesn't matter if it's wonderful or not. It just knows that it's something different, right? So yeah, that'll be my little add-on takeaway with that. And then how can we find you? What are you doing? How can we get your book? All of that. How can we connect with Ryanna?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I have my personal account. It's Ryanna Hammond. And then
Mhm.
I also have my business. It's All with Heart.
Mhm.
And on my website, you can find my workshops. Right now, you get my first workshop
Mhm.
for free if you sign up for my email list. And it's called Tap Into Your Higher Self. And just by signing up, you get a coupon code to get it for free. I also have merch and my poetry books on there and my novel on there.
Mhm.
My novel and all my books are also available all on Amazon and TikTok. You can go to Poems in Pretty Places. So that
Mhm.
one it
Mhm.
needs a name change.
Like, oh,
That one's
name.
a couple of years behind schedule with the name. But Poems in Pretty Places
Mhm.
is where I am on TikTok.
Yeah, awesome. And I just got your book the other day, so it's in the
Mm,
mail. It'll be here
nice.
soon. So if you get it, you can read along with me. I'm super excited for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for me right now, I have my year ahead readings. I haven't like officially announced them as being offered like with this new coming year, and I'll leave like a discount down below. But I am doing my year ahead psychic tarot readings. So I highly recommend you get these readings because what it does is it lets you be prepared for each quarter of the year ahead. So what to expect as far as like actual things to expect, everything that you're like allowed to know or supposed to know for your own good, and then also what to expect like lesson wise, so that you don't go into that quarter and experience things you're like, oh, it's going wrong and I'm doing it wrong. But like when you have this reading, you're like, oh, this is what was supposed to happen and unfold, and I'm supposed to learn these lessons. And you can move through the year with so much more ease and effectiveness, like we were talking about. It's like having that pre-given intuition. And they're really amazing. They're really amazing to watch them come to fruition with clients, because the way that they're laid out, like I love catching up with people, and I'm like, okay, what's going on with you? And they tell me exactly what I told them what would be happening. So yeah, definitely check out my year ahead readings. And also All with Heart, the logo. I
Yes.
created for Ryanna. So if you don't
Yeah.
know, I do digital design. I don't really advertise it. But while you go and check out her site, if you are in need of a like logo or book cover or anything like that, you can hit me up as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Ryanna, for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
I loved just how the conversation flowed and how we rode to all these different places with intuition. So it was a good topic. Yeah.
It's awesome. I feel like this is how we normally talk
Right.
when we hang out, just like a little more polished and structured. But
Right.
so thank you so much for hanging out with us. And yeah, I hope you all have a sunny day. Thank you for tuning in to the Sunny Days podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch more of my free content by following me at Alex the Good Witch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me on Instagram. I appreciate your time here with me today. Peace and love to you all, and I will see you in the next episode.